Hello everybody, this is Loki or WayOfLoci, and welcome to No Hit Podcast. Here it's my job to interview extraordinary gamers in the realms of challenge running, whether that be no hit runs, completing games in their entirety without taking a hit or single point of damage, speed runs, completing games that would normally take hours in mere minutes, and other such ventures. Today's guest is GoesOnGhost. That's GoesOnGhost on Twitch and YouTube, and Switched on Lotus on Twitter. Ghost is a legend in the no-hit Bloodborne community, Bloodborne being created by the same developers as the Dark Souls series, with Ghost being the first and only person to have completed the all bosses plus DLC plus Chalice dungeons no-hit run. Several people have completed the all bosses and DLC no-hit, but Ghost is the only person to have completed the Chalice dungeons in addition, which requires more than doubling the amount of bosses having to deal with in the run, plus extremely difficult routing sections through the dungeons. She's also completed several difficult niche runs, including all bosses Arcane only no-hit, and all bosses BL4 no-hit, requiring completing the game no-hit whilst never leveling up during the entire run, as well as having delved into Hitless Speedrunning, and also completed all bosses plus DLC plus Chalice dungeons at 1 HP and 1 stamina for the entire run. In this conversation we go through Ghost's approach to this incredible Chalice dungeon run, including learning, routing, and the perseverance involved in completing this run, which took over a year and a half. We go into Ghost's involvement as a moderator of the Team Hitless community, a community of dedicated no-hit runners. Ghost has also done all these amazing runs whilst being born with one hand, which she describes the small accessibility changes needed to accommodate that. I hope you enjoy this conversation with GoesOnGhost. Right, Ghost, thanks for taking some time out. Welcome to the podcast. How's it going?
Yeah, thank you. No problem.
So I wanted to start, we're going to go through a lot of stuff challenge running related, but I wanted to start with, what is it about Bloodborne that appeals to you or has made you keep with this game for so long? What is it that draws you into the game?
What drew me into the game mostly was the lore, the beast design. It's like what kept me into the game was mostly the combat. I like the backstab mechanics, the parries, limb breaks, all of that. I just find it a very satisfying game to play.
What was it about the Bloodborne mechanics that you enjoyed more so than the traditional Dark Souls?
Like having to backstab to get, having to do a charged R2 to do a backstab. I found parrying in the game a lot easier than in Dark Souls personally. It's just very fluid combat.
Did you enjoy it as much during your vanilla playthrough, or was it always there, or did it come a lot more to do when you started the challenge runs of it?
More when I started doing challenge runs and kind of learned how to play the game. I liked it initially, but when I first played the game, I had no idea about transform attacks, that you could even do backstabs in the game. So it was mostly just me spamming R1.
Yeah, I pretty much did only that. I didn't really. I don't think I found out about the transform, the L1, until many run throughs.
Yeah, they have them in little tutorials, but they're hidden away.
So from just doing vanilla playthrough or from first introduction, what was the first involvement to anything challenge running related?
That was just me finding the no-hit community through Twitch. First came to Twitch because of through Democracy's boss ranking videos, and learned that he streamed, and was just kind of looking through actually the Demon Souls category and found a Milty Milt doing no hit in Demon Souls. So I followed him and then found Donnie Rect through his auto host, and through that I found Slippery Susie and just started to find more and more of the community after that.
And what point did it go from being introduced to the community to thinking let's have a go at this, so to speak?
Just some of the streamers were just, once Donnie said that it was clear that I had a lot of passion about the game because I was still learning stuff about it, and so I should give no hit a shot. In the beginning I thought that would be impossible to do, but after doing some somewhat lighter challenges like a luck build in Dark Souls 3 and trying BL4 and Bloodborne, I decided to give it a shot.
And how was the experience going for your first no-hit run?
Man, I wonder if I can even remember that. It was hard. At that point, there wasn't a lot of guides out there, so I was just kind of following what I saw from streamers.
What kind of time period was this? Was there how many runners, or what kind of runners? How many runners was there at the moment or at that time?
There were only roughly 20 or so members of Team Hitless at that point. It was late 2017, and Team Hitless, Hitless runs were kind of started late 2016.
What was the point of going? So completed the first no-hit run. What was the next step? Was it into a separate weapon, or did it go into niche runs like the BL4 or Arcane?
I was actually initially gonna try to do like the other games first. Like started with Dark Souls 2, then try doing Dark Souls 3. Not really sticking to anything, but then I actually tried to do Dark Souls 3 all bosses like right away, and that was a bit off more than I can chew with that.
These three be tricky.
Yeah. It was also just I used a very long route, so it was like very taxing on me. So I decided to try to go back to Bloodborne. At that point I watched a lot of Couch Jockey and his magic runs and thought if it was possible to do a Arcane run in Bloodborne hitless using the Arcane Hunter tools, Flame Sprayer, all that. And no one had ever done that before, so it was something I could route myself.
Did you enjoy that aspect of it?
I did. I really like routing.
It's because you carried on with the arcane into the all bosses, all so pretty much the all boss thing is.
Yeah.
What's apart from obviously the weapon selection? What's like the key differences potentially in terms of bosses that arcane you have to switch around with arcane as opposed to perhaps like the traditional weapon?
Let me think. Trying to remember because it's been such a long time since I've done an arcane run. Gascoigne stays the same with the music box, which is were a little different because usually on my Wolf 1 you had to do them on any percent. And usually when I'm fighting witches now, I don't mark out of the fight, but on arcane you like have to because you just don't have the damage to deal with the summons at the same time. And shadows, I remembered I saved the like pyromancer mace shadow towards the end rather than the candle shadow because you can't really loop him like you can on with the saw spear or the cleaver.
So what would be the order of finishing off the shadows in arcane? It'd be still the sword guy first or the katana guy first?
Yeah, it was the katana guy first, and I believe it was that, and then I would take out the candle shadow, and then save pyromancer for last because he had the least amount of health, so he would at least die faster. After that, Rom would be basically one cycled because I would have the executioner gloves at that point. One Reborn was still basically the same. I just used augur on the bell maidens and then used flame sprayer on him to break the limbs.
So in arcane, what are the weapon like selections or what's the damage options?
Damage options, like in the very beginning, I use the Molotov cocktails and the flame sprayer because they're the only ones that would scale with arcane. And at the time, I wanted to really stick with only using weapons or items that scaled or used arcane, which is so I didn't use like the poison knife cheese on Mikolash. I just hit him from above.
Okay, so it was literally arcane only or arcane related items only.
Yeah, and after killing Vicar Amelia, the run would take a much different turn than a normal 90%. Instead of going straight to shadows, I would be first going to the woods, getting a tonsil stone. Then I could go to the lecture hall to get the augur. Then going to Hemwick Charnel Lane to get in order to get to Canehurst to get the executioner gloves. So shadows wouldn't show up until probably like an hour or so into the run.
Be scary. Just think about the run differences because on top of that you've done many like weapon only. So arcane is like I think it's had separate from the weapon onlys, even though they have their own variations. But I'd say other one differences would be like blood level 4. How did you find going into like such a restricted challenge like that?
Like, is this for like the no hit for BL4 or just normal BL4?
How was the first experience just doing it the first time and then the progression into no hit?
Mostly what I remember is like being hard stuck on a Brightest for a long time. Actually, like took a break from BL4 because I just didn't know how to fight her, and that's all I can actually remember for my first BL4. But I got into the BL4 no hit because initially it was Colmer who wanted to do BL4 all bosses since it has never been done before, but he did some attempts on it, but he eventually stopped streaming and Eden wanted to complete it in his honor. So after he eventually got it, yeah, I thought it'd be a good challenge, So I did it started it shortly after he got it.
And tried it any great increase in difficulty or anything like that?
Oh yeah, Shadows is harder because you just have less damage. Most of any percent is kind of the same. Mikolash, I had to use the poison knife cheese because fighting him with that low damage is just would be terrible. And then I'd say the boss that like first becomes a real big issue is Logarius because you actually have to fight his phase 2, and there's a lot of jank in that fight, especially when he like puts his sword in the ground and there's like this sword rain like with swords flying everywhere.
So is the damage at any percent, you're able to skip second phase, is that right?
Yeah, and with that attack, it can bug out, so you try to shoot the sword to like break like stop the attack, and it just you can literally see yourself shoot it and it won't break, or the sword starts shooting much sooner, so you get hit even like right before you can even shoot the sword. Sometimes the sword will like fall through the map, but the swords will stay in the air, so you have to like run around the arena for the entire like I feel like I think it lasts a minute, maybe even more. And then basically everything in the DLC is a problem. Like there's no way to like quickly kill any boss in the DLC. And then Gehrman also really tough, having to fight like all 3 phases. And then probably one of the biggest changes is Moon Presence because you can't skip her 1 HP attack. So you can either just tank it and just not count as a hit, or you can go through a setup in the Hunter's Dream to set your HP down to 1 so that you can argue that it technically doesn't do anything, so it really doesn't count as a hit.
The other variety one was that I saw was a no HUD run. Did that significantly change your like the playthrough of it?
The biggest difference in that one was I couldn't use any visual indicator on the health bars for shadows to know when second phase was going to start. So I did the parry and visceral strats. So I to keep the damage consistent, but that was basically the only change.
It's like X number of visceral attacks will equal approximately enough to have that
Yeah,
level. Any of the any of the other bosses, or was like did the fact that you couldn't see stamina not really affect it too much? Because I know like in at least a traditional like any percent, you don't level up stamina at all or endurance at all. I don't know if it's any different in the old bosses run.
some people will do it for the DLC to have like some extra, to be able to do like some extra L1s specifically on Maria, but I usually never do it. Yeah, you can basically work with your base stamina throughout the entire run. Sometimes people will pick up, actually, most people pick up a rune that patches will drop or will give you to increase your stamina. And there's a second rune in the Forbidden Woods that you can pick up, and if you add those 2 together, you can do like a charged R2, like 2 no, it's like a charged R2, another charged R2, and then an L1, which I took advantage of in the BL4 run because that actually helped being able to do that last L1 at times, especially on Maria.
I want to go into the all bosses Chalice dungeons run, but quick query on because you put a large amount of time into Bloodborne and was interested in how or if boredom ever becomes a thing, or if the variety of runs eliminates that, or in any way, other way.
It took a long while, but I think I think it's starting to get there a little bit with boredom. Like, I'm still enjoying most of the runs I'm still doing in Bloodborne, but right now I've actually been starting and working on the Dark Souls 2 no-hit to add a bit more variety. But I don't really see myself like being completely done with Bloodborne still anytime soon.
How come Dark Souls 2?
I'd say it's like probably my favorite of the trilogy. It's a game I enjoy. And it's just been a no-hit that's piqued my interest.
Dark Souls 2 was like my first introduction to the Dark Souls from Software games. I still really enjoy it, even though there's two sides to Dark Souls 2, it seems. So like
Yeah.
approach.
It was actually my first Soulsborne game too, which might be a reason why I really like it.
You've also got into at least recently Hitless Speedrunning. Has that brought anything to like anything different to it?
Well, and learning a lot of the hitless speedrun strats. I actually spent a good portion of today just practicing like the fast shadows, the fast ROM strat, which has been pretty annoying, honestly. That specific one.
Could you describe the ROM one? I know like the traditional setup, blood beast pellets and such. What's
Yeah,
the
you go in front of ROM. I pop both the pellet and fire paper. On a speedrun, you'd use bolt, but really the only way to get bolt is to die and go to Parl, which you obviously can't do on a no hit. So you have to use fire and kill the spiders to build up your meter, and then basically do the same combo on ROM that you would do on normal hitless, just without building up the meter on her head, and then so you won't have enough damage to actually like one cycle her unless she hops back enough times. But yeah, usually you get that damage in. She teleports, and then you have to use the moonlight in the arena as a guide to know where she's going to teleport in, because the places where she teleports in are set. It's just hard to find them because it's such a like pure white arena, and then you have to finish her off as she's teleporting in, which the timing is just very tight on that. Like, I still have had it a few times where I don't quite get there in time, so she has enough time to attack, or the spiders have enough time to attack. It's really precise.
Have you found any difference? So speedrunning is interesting too with resets, because Hitless is very, very like black and white in terms of you get hit, you reset, or if you're at a low PB, of course, and not doing like PB run. How have you
Yeah.
found with speedrunning that balance between being cautious enough, or is it more focused towards the speedrun now because the Hitless side is already pretty much done and dusted kind of thing?
Yeah, I still play it like while I'm prioritizing speed more. I still play it pretty safe because it's just so easy to get hit in that game if you're trying to go fast. I usually don't reset on like every hit at this point, but usually only when I die, because otherwise I could have days where I could have like a whole days where I just don't get past shadows or ROM.
At least with the most recent ones I saw, it was the all bosses runs. Do you have a preference towards like Hitless speedrunning in a longer category or in like just any percent?
I just like really enjoy fighting all the bosses in the game, minus chalices. I like the chalices too, but I'm not speedrunning that one. But so I just like doing the all bosses category.
So going into the Chalice dungeons, what's first? Could you describe for people who might not be aware, like, because people are aware of the Chalice dungeons, but I don't think many people have actually gone into them in depth. They might have tried the first one from like Starving Bloodstarved Beast, but may not have ventured further. So could you describe what the Chalice dungeons actually are?
So when you kill Bloodstarved Beast, you get your first chalice, which is just it just looks like a cup and it's in your inventory. And there's these sets of tombstones in the dream that are separate from the ones that just warp you to places in the game, and you set a chalice onto them to open up a series of dungeons. And so you enter the dungeon, you try to there's like bunch of unique enemies only that only exist in the chalices that you have to deal with, and you have to find. And usually as soon as you appear into them, you see a door with like, I believe they're purple lights, and that is the door that will get you to the boss. But before you can fight the boss, you have to find the lever that opens that door. So you get the lever, open the door, fight the boss, and then like progress like further down into the dungeons until you reach the bottom. You'll fight the final boss, and then you'll get like a new chalice that supposed to like take you even deeper. And you basically just kind of repeat that until you get to the final boss, which is Queen Yarnum, and that like marks the end of the chalices, in so much to get like the platinum trophy from the chalices. So there's four like different variations of the chalices. There's like Tumaru, which is like kind of the classic one, and then there's like Hintertomb, which is mostly poison area, Lauren, which is like kind of like a desert area with it's mostly like populated with beast type enemies, and then there's which is the only one I didn't go through on my personal on my no hit, because all the bosses that appear in that specific chalice only show up elsewhere in the run. And the appeal of doing the chalice dungeons is to get these special chalices called root chalices, which when you set them on the tombstone, you get essentially a randomly generated chalice. It's like a randomly generated dungeon, and there's ways to like increase the difficulty depending on what materials you use to create the chalice. And usually people do that so they can find really high level gems for their weapons.
So in terms of extra additional difficulty that it can place on them, what would be an example of that?
Like you can use you can set it so that it takes away half your health, or like just enemies are just stronger. I think there's like a third, but I'm not quite sure what that one does, but it's essentially it.
And you're the only person I believe who has beaten all bosses, all Chalice dungeons, no hits. Why?
Yeah, I am.
Why do? And I don't think anyone's attempted since. What's the difficulty or additional difficulty that the Chalice Dungeon brings that makes people or made people prior and potentially currently avoid or not want to try that run?
The Chalices, like they're an interesting part of the game, but they, in my opinion and many other people's opinion, weren't really executed very well. They're a slog to get through. You have to just first you got to find the lever to open the boss door, but you also have to explore more of them to get things called ritual materials so that you can create even more chalices, and including the ones that like advance the story per se. Like there's like the chalices that aren't root chalices aren't randomized, they're like set, which is the ones I went through, and they're usually called story chalices, and it's really time consuming to gather all of those materials even with an optimized route. And a lot of the bosses that you find in there will show up again. Like there's a lot of repeat bosses. If the chalices didn't repeat bosses at all, it'd probably be like only like 3 chalices, but I go through 9 because they really padded it out.
Mm.
And the chalices, like even though there's like 4 variations, they all look pretty much the same, so they can be they can become like less interesting real fast. And also just the enemy placements in there are just really difficult to get through without getting hit. Like I got the idea for my arcane runs to use arcane hunter tools to get through them, and I don't think you can get through them like hitless consistently without having ranged options. Like even when I attempted the run on BL4, I had to upgrade my gun to have damage for ranged options.
Was focus ever an issue? Because this was a at least the VOD of the final run was 7 hours. Was focus ever an issue in order for such a long run?
I'm sure it was. Focus, I would say I just got better at with time, but it was basically the way I approached it was that I think even when I got to like really low PBs, I would still continue the run even if I took a hit because of just how long it was. And knowing that I generally need to only go through something like once made focusing easier, like once for the day or so.
So there wasn't a thought of like a reset, start again kind of thing. It was just the one and done, so to speak.
Yeah, because at the time it was like I think the final VOD was like 6.5 hours. I've optimized the route a lot more recently, so now I can actually get the run in under 4 hours.
Which speedy, a minute. So on top of keeping with the run in terms of the length of it, it's also what was it about this particular run that's kept you with it for IRL time, so to speak? Because I believe this took just over a year, I think.
Yeah, it's like a year and a half. I stuck with it because like the reason I started it was because I mostly wanted to know if it was possible, and when I routed it and everything, I could see that it really was, and it would just just the knowledge that it would be like a major world's first is basically what kept me going with it.
So having done the pretty much everything, no hit, so to speak, what would you say is your favorite boss, either just in general or from a no hit perspective, and also weapon, as you've like say you've done many of these runs, weapon only, like Kirkamura only or Rekio only, or pretty much all of them, I believe.
Yeah, favorite weapon I would say is the probably still the Kirk hammer. It was like my first like weapon I used in my first playthrough, and I just find it a very fun weapon.
It's also strange. I found it personally strange when using it because it seems so. I don't know if out of place is the right word, but a very blunt method for the game.
Yeah, definitely. As for favorite boss, like I switch around on that a lot, but I think I would say it's Vicar Amelia.
Hmm?
She kind of gets shafted in the no hit because we stagger lock her to death, but when you actually fight her, she's a very complex boss, and I think one of the most fair bosses in the game too.
Who would you say is the worst boss on, or not? I guess worst is probably the wrong word for it, but like difficult boss.
So, well, the if we're including Chalice as like the worst boss for that run was Forgotten Madman and Escort, because it starts off with like a single hunter who has a really fast blunderbuss attack, which is already annoying. He can get iframes on his jumps and everything too. But when you get him to like about a fourth of health, a second hunter shows up, and they're both like really aggressive, and they're chasing you in a very small arena. Like that was probably the most problem boss, and still is.
And for the like vanilla or vanilla plus DLC,
So for vanilla and DLC,
or separate if that's easier, from like all bosses and then from the DLC.
okay, so like the worst from those two. Worst for vanilla. Well, I can definitely say the worst for any percent is shadows, but that's virtually everyone who's ever done no hit in Bloodborne knows that. Just three enemies with three different AIs. A lot to have to keep track of. For vanilla, probably Moon Presence. She's actually a decently difficult boss not to get hit on, even when you don't include the 1 HP attack. Like she's can cover a lot of ground real quick. She has this little trample that can catch you off guard. Some kind of somewhat wonky hitboxes as well. And for the DLC, probably Maria. She like this the strat is to use R1 L1 to build up meter, but on one of her attacks she gets hyper armor, so she can like
Ignore you kind of thing.
basically ignore the attack and continue attacking you. And usually with the counter hit damage, it just kills you. And she can do it like because usually I do like R1 L1 like, and even while like keeping it staggered like that, I can like do an R1, and right as soon as I start doing the L1, she goes into that hyper armor attack. Phase 2 and Phase 3 can be pretty scary, which is why most runners just try to skip it.
So is that like an element of RNG, or is there an actual way to avoid falling prey to that?
It's mostly RNG. Like I actually got hit by it recently, and basically the way you can tell it's going to happen is if you hit her with an R1. If she does not stagger with it, you know she's about to do the hyper armor attack. But it's like you have to have like insane reflexes to notice that before actually committing to an L1. So it's not something I feel like I could reliably avoid every time if she does it at the right time.
One of the other runs that you've done sort of separate from, although I can't really say separate because it is a no hit, it would have to be a no hit run, is your 1 HP, 1 stamina run.
Oh yeah.
How was, because it sounds exactly, for people listening, it sounds exactly what it is, having 1 HP and 1 stamina, but not just a normal run. This was an all bosses Chalice dungeon run.
Yeah.
How was that as an experience?
Well, it was interesting because it wasn't like you couldn't sprint at all. You could roll but like you couldn't like spam rolls, but you could still at least take advantage of iframes, which helped. ROM was like probably the first problem because when she does her meteor attack, it's like really difficult to avoid that if you can't sprint it. And basically the other thing I can remember is that Queen Yarnum was like insanely difficult because she could a lot of her blood attacks come out fast like right after each other. So usually you would just kind of spam roll to avoid them, but that's not something you could get away with.
How did that come about out of interest? What's like, let me show how it works, because in terms of modded stuff, I'm sort of surprised with Bloodborne when stuff like that comes out, because Bloodborne being PS4 only.
Could you repeat that?
Just wondering where that 1 HP, 1 stamina came about,
Oh,
because I think there's, or at least I've not seen a huge amount of modded content.
so there's it's probably something you could probably set up with a jailbroken PS4, which I have now. But at the time, I used something called a save wizard that allows you to like edit your PS4 saves, which is like that's like it's not a free software. You do have to pay for it, but it's one of the cheaper ways to be able to somewhat mod your game in Bloodborne. But yeah, you can edit your save to give yourself 1 HP and 1 stamina. The only thing that was annoying is that whenever you leveled up, those stats would like reset to their default value, so I had to like reapply that mod a lot of the time.
I wanted to go into approach about how you go about learning these runs, but one thing I want to bring up first is, could you describe your disability if that's okay?
Oh yeah, I was born without a left hand, and so I have like half an arm. And I've been playing video games ever since I was young, and adjusted to using the controllers pretty without much difficulty. And same was true with Bloodborne. The only thing I really need to change with Bloodborne accessibility wise was to go into a PS4 to remap the buttons for L1 and triangle so that I can do transform attacks with the triangle button instead of L1, because like the L1 button is like the basically the hardest button for me to reach.
So, what was triangle? Triangle's heal in Bloodborne, is that right?
Yeah, so L1 to be heal, but when you're doing no hit,
Yeah.
that's not as important to get to.
Yeah. So from that, going to how I mean, you've done so many runs at this moment, so you got like such a probably most amount of knowledge of the game probably than anyone else. But going into the runs, if you can remember, how did you approach learning them, routing them, and the bosses, getting them down?
Like started out with just like watching other streamers like doing Bloodborne no hit. At the time, Lethal 3 was a very active runner, and like when I first started learning runs, I learned like most of how the game worked from him. He's currently not streaming at the moment. Hopefully we'll be back one day, but I actually still think he probably knows more than me about the game because he has like so much experience with one just doing no hits in the game on any percent specifically, but just a lot all the challenge runs he's done. So when I was first learning the game, every time there was like something weird, like a weird hit, I would ask him about it, and he'd usually have the answer for what happened. But for like specific bosses, I would just, make save files and just practice them, and yeah, just practice them. I usually would also set up a little feature in my OBS where you can capture like a 30-second replay of whatever was like being streamed or recorded, and that's how I would like review hits so I could see what was actually happening, and that's usually how I do it.
So just a good example would be the Chalice dungeons, as I like probably the only person who routed that properly. How did that process begin and then develop?
A little hard to remember, but I started with probably just like doing playthroughs of the chalices first, just to get familiarized, like like where to go to get the right materials. And some people had like tried routing the chalices beforehand, but they just gave up on it because they found it too much of a pain. But I think I was the first one to consider using like arcane hunter tools to get through the areas, which help. And basically, I just routed more and more when anytime I faced a problem from runs when just doing attempts. So if there was like something that got me, I'd usually like spend time after stream just practicing that area and seeing how I can go about it differently to make it more consistent.
For the Chalice dungeons, how I believe there's 19 bosses in vanilla and DLC. Is that right? First.
There's about 22, I think.
Okay, so that's the all bosses and DLC. How many or what was then added from the Chalice dungeons?
I believe it was, I think in total there's like 28 bosses you have to get through. They're not all unique bosses, like a lot of them are repeats, but in order to like actually get to every unique boss in the game, you basically have to go through 28 of them in the chalices.
So even if
So it all totaled up to be a neat 50.
how nice of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, because even though the riskins, they have to be then defeated, and so I guess that was sort of, I guess, perhaps helped in, even though it's fighting the same boss, it might have an element of like same Z, you have double the practice or triple or how many times the boss shows up.
Yeah.
So with such a long run or going over such a long period of time, how did you keep focused on improvement, or was there a point in just it kept to runs? Like, just interested in having so much to do. How did you keep focused on like the improvement aspect of each individual section?
I think it eventually just got to like just doing attempts and focusing on whatever hit me that day. Like it was very much just dealing with any problem that came up because there'll be times where like one area seemed solid, but then something went wrong, so I had to reevaluate it.
What was your first introduction to Team Hitless? So it's about the introduction of No Hero and going from runners to runners. When did or what was your first involvement with the team, and then further involvement as you're a mod for the community as well? Like,
Joined the team after getting Bloodborne any percent, and I'm not sure, just like the team just kept getting bigger and bigger, so they just kept getting more and more people, and I would just join new and different streams. And at some point, like people had been saying that with the team getting bigger, it would be cool if there was like a website like dedicated to Team Hitless and the runners. And I have experience in building websites, so eventually decided to like make one. Stayed up for about maybe a year or so, and around that time, Eden like created the Team Hitless Discord, and I think because of my involvement with the website, I was selected to be a mod in the beginning. And then Kazoodle and Ginny made a revamped version of the website, which is what we have now. So I don't really know if I can like pinpoint like how like all this like how it all went down, but I just basically just joined streams and spent time in the community as it got bigger.
And at the current moment, there's been like events have started from Team Hitless themselves, so having their own like separate Twitch channel. How do you find the participation in events? Is that something you've enjoyed as you've been part of one of McRaptor's
Oh
tournaments
yeah,
last
I've
year?
always enjoyed those. We before we had like Team Hitless making events like this year, there had been like a number of like tournaments that had been put together either through used to be McRaptor, now it's Eric Harper, and there used to be a no hit runner called No Hit Jerome who also put together like tournaments for runners to join, and I always and Slippery Susie had like a little had a smaller one for like newer runners, and yeah, I always enjoyed joining any of those tournaments or events.
Do you enjoy the competitive aspect, or is it like the showcase of the runs themselves, or both?
I'd say both. Already, so Lethal 3 put together a BL4 tournament as well.
And to do with so just mentioned there like streams, what is about the live streaming that you enjoy or that keeps you doing it, I guess?
I just enjoy the social interaction with the viewers the most. Like, I definitely get like wrapped up in the runs too, but I think I have a lot more fun doing them with people rather than just doing them offline.
So if you could give one piece of advice for a new no hit runner, what advice would that be?
Well, I would since the team is so big and there's like an abundance of guides, like watch different guides. But also, while it makes it counterintuitive, I would also recommend like looking at how speedrunners go through like areas and such, because a lot of like it's not like a perfect like one to one, but a lot of speedrun tech actually gets you through a lot of areas quite safely. And just I guess another bit of advice is have some way to like record your hits so you can look at them after you gotten hit. Because I've had times where I've got hit and like thought it was like unavoidable in the moment, but upon like actually reviewing it, I could see like how it was my fault or how it wasn't my fault. But always just review your hits.
If one game could be released tomorrow, either an announced, unannounced, or a sequel to a game you don't think will exist, what game would it be?
I'm not sure. I part of me would be really down for a sequel to Bloodborne, but yeah, I'm not really sure.
I was talking to Clamps, and he was talking about, I think Vatia made a video on potential ideas for Bloodborne 2, which had some cool concepts. But I
Oh yeah.
don't think it's. I don't know, I'm from mainly like, I've did Sekiro for quite a while, and the same ideas of it'd be great having that same combat system in a Sekiro 2, but it seems to be all like forward with new stuff, which is good in a sense because it keeps like variety, like so many different things
Yeah.
coming up in Elden Ring compared to anything that's come before, and the same thing that happened with Bloodborne when it came out in comparison to Dark Souls. I said at the start, like they add in the viscerals and the different dodge mechanics, and it's from software, but it's different.
Yeah, I think it's good for From Software to try different stuff. I think it ultimately just makes better games.
There's a very large mental aspects to do with challenge runs, where it can be difficult when like trying to get to a low PB or trying to get the run, or whether in speedrunning, hitless running, or others. Could you tell a time when a run was taking its toll and how you managed to get past that?
Well, like the Chalice run definitely took its toll on me quite a bit, and honestly, just having like support from like loved ones, like close friends, and even viewers from the chat made helped me stick with it.
If I said most hyped or celebrated moment on stream, on your stream, what would the first one that comes to mind?
Oh, I'd say it was me actually getting the Chalice's run.
What was the moment like? Because like say a year and a half, the like all coming to fruition. What was like? How long did it take to settle down? What was the first thing after that you did, or like the first stream afterwards?
Well, the first stream after that, I was actually routing for all achievements no hit, which I might go back to, but I don't know. It just felt like surreal that it actually happened. Like it just, some streamers will have like times where they feel like today is the day when it comes to like where they're going to get the run, and it didn't feel like that on that day. It just felt like another attempt.
At what point in the run? I guess it's hard to say because in terms of like doing runs myself, it's sometimes hard to know. But at what point in the splits, in the 50 splits, was it? This has an inkling.
It was pretty. I would say like maybe the first is when we got past Madman and Escort. Like that was like it's like the outside of stuff from like main game and DLC. That's like one of the first big hurdles. But I think the part where it like really felt like it could be it was when I got past the second abhorrent beast in one of the Lauren chalices. Because that I had a run that got all the way to him like not too long ago, not too long before that, and like it died to him. I actually spent like a few days like practicing that specific boss because of how much of a problem he was.
And what split kind of thing was that around?
That's like split 45 of 50.
Okay. And at the current moment, what's in the future plans of Goes on Ghost?
Well, right now it's working on getting a hitless run in sub 1 hour and 30 minutes. Another is I want to redo the Chalice's run with a faster time because I've optimized it a lot more. At one point I was working on BL4 all bosses plus Chalices, which I probably will go back to. I've just been taking a break from it. And also probably working on runs from different games, like just working on DS 20% at the moment.
And if people wanted to check you out, where would they be looking?
Yeah, obviously you can find me on Twitch, GoesOnGhost, GoesOnGhost on YouTube as well, and I have a Twitter that's mostly just me saying when I go live, but it's switched on Lotus because GoesOnGhost was taken.
So many changes I've had to do with previous stuff with that. Right, Ghost, I really appreciate taking the time out today to do this. I enjoyed this conversation. I hope you had fun.
Yeah, this was great. Thank you.
No worries at all. I hope everyone listening enjoyed it as well. Have a good rest of your day, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
See ya.
If you enjoyed the conversation and want to hear more interviews with extraordinary gamers, be sure to head over to youtube.com/WayOfLoci, Loki spelled with a C, or wayofloki.com/nohitpodcast.